Hi, my dear friends. It's good that you've joined me today, and I'm so excited about starting a new series. And we're going to look at the fifth book of Moses, the fifth book of the Bible. That's called Deuteronomy, and I'm so excited about that. And I'd like to start by reading the first verses that we find in Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy chapter 1 and verse 1. And this is what it says here. It says, "These are the words that Moses spoke to all Israel beyond the Jordan in the wilderness." And then let's go to verse 3. "In the 40th year, on the first day of the 11th month, Moses spoke to the people of Israel according to all the Lord had given him in commandments to them." Yeah, Moses is going to die very, very soon. According to the Hebrew calendar, they were in the middle of January, and another 10 weeks, and they would celebrate the Exodus from Egypt. But they're not just going to celebrate something that happened in the past. It was time to move on. And they were now on the verge of entering the promised land. That what God had promised them so many years ago, they were now going to get a hold of it. And they would all enter the promised land, all of them except Moses. He had missed his chance. He got very excited in another story in the book of Numbers, and he disobeyed God, and God told him that he had forfeited the right of going to enter the promised land. So he was going to die very soon, and most of the others had died. Miriam, his sister, was dead, and his brother Aaron had died before, and all the people who had been slaves in Egypt, they had all died. Those who'd experienced God's goodness and power, they had all died. And God said they wouldn't enter into that what he's prepared for them because of the disbelief or the unbelief. And this was, equated to disobedience. They just didn't believe God, and they refused to obey what he said. So that was the penalty. They died in the wilderness. And now the majority of the people are on the verge of entering the promised land. They're almost on the banks of the River Jordan. They're almost going to something new. And it's time for Moses to leave the stage of world history. He was a man who had really formed the nation of Israel. And Deuteronomy, it tells us about forming the nation. And this book of Deuteronomy, it starts with, or it is the farewell speech that Moses gives this people. He's going to leave them, and this talk will take 2 weeks to complete. And it will end, and the book ends, of course, with the death of the great leader. Now, Deuteronomy is more than just a tearful farewell of the great leader. Deuteronomy, it means the second law, but he's not giving them a new law. He's just repeating some of the stuff that they experienced and some of the stuff that God promised them and God spoke to them in the book of Exodus and the book of Numbers. It's just a repeat, in other words. But Moses is speaking to a new generation. He's speaking to a generation that wasn't slaves in Egypt. He's speaking to a generation who didn't experience the 10 plagues that God sent to Egypt so that the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, would let the Israelites free. They didn't experience the miracle of seeing God part the Red Sea so that they could go through. And they didn't experience the miracle of the provision that they had in the wilderness. Well, maybe they did experience it, but it was just normal because they had that since they were born every single day. They hadn't experienced God as the other people had experienced. Maybe like the generation that's alive today. We've forgotten who God is. We've shut him out of society in more or less. The modern society doesn't have any room for him, and in many families they don't have any Christian heritage that they can pass on to the coming generations. And I used to love it when my father-in-law would visit us, and he would always have stories to tell. He'd been a soldier in the Second World War. He wasn't a convinced soldier. He went because he had to go. He didn't want to go, but he went, and there he started to experience God in supernatural ways. He was taken prisoner by the Russians, and there he experienced God's provision and God's help in those days. And after the war, he continued, and he would always have a story to tell. And we heard these stories. Sometimes he repeated them. Sometimes on the same day he'd repeat them 3 times. But they were stories about what he had experienced with God, and he was passing them on to the next generation. He's passing them on to even the generation after him. And we try to keep these alive today, and we tell also our stories. We got something that we can pass on, and that's what Moses is doing. And I want to dedicate these talks that I'm going to do in the next few days. I want to dedicate them to my grandchildren. I've got 18 of them, and this is something that I want to pass on to them as part of their spiritual heritage. But not only these 18 grandchildren that we have, but also for all of the new generation that belongs to this generation that is up and coming. May you experience God in a fresh way, in a greater way than what we've experienced him. And of course, for us all, we're all included in this. David also said, he said, even though I am old and grey, don't leave me, Lord, until I've told the coming generation about your power. So that's what we're going to try to have a look at. What has God done in the past, and what does he want to do in the future? And in these difficult days, 2023, I want to call these talks, how can we now live? How can we now live? And that's for us, older generation, but also for the younger generation. And I think that's what Moses is telling these people. They're going to go into the promised land. They're going to also have their own experiences with God. God is going to be with them, but don't forget him. And he's going to lay before them the choice of blessings or curses, life or death. And in one place he says, so choose now life. So how can we live in these days? By choosing life is one great point. So I'm looking forward to having a look at what Moses said to the new generation, the generation that didn't know, the generation that didn't have their own experience at this time. He's just passing some stuff, and he's passing on stuff about the goodness of God, about God's love and God's mercy. And so I'm very excited, and I do hope that you will join me during these days. We'll go on until Monday, Thursday. That's the Thursday before Easter this year on the 6th of April. And I won't be speaking on Saturday and Sunday. I need a little bit of rest. So I'm looking forward to you joining me again tomorrow. See you then. Okay, bye-bye. Bob Hatton, the Encourager.